Relebohile, I'd like to touch on that internationalization thing. You sell your products not only in South Africa, but also in New Zealand as well, I think. Yes, you're establishing that.
We've got an online store in New Zealand.
An online store in New Zealand. So that means if you understand the demographics of New Zealand, they're quite different than those of South Africans. So how, I mean, are they actually, in terms of product making, is there a difference in getting your product export ready? Like in terms of being SABS approved, like that SABS process, ne? You want to get your product to tick the boxes to hit international markets, right? Is there a difference between national and international markets in terms of your product range?
I think the standard is the same because when you export, the only certificates that you need is the certificate of conformity and the stability testing. But in terms of SABS testing speaks to your manufacturing process. So your ISO 9001, it just gives other stakeholders. My colleague mentioned earlier that she contract manufactures. So she doesn't manufacture herself, she does contract manufacturing. So when she goes out and looks for contract manufacturers, she wants that certification to say, are you guys ISO 9001 certified? You know, do you conform with global standards, which is the ISO 9001 standard of manufacturing? But in terms of exporting, the only certificates that you need is the certificate of originality, the certificate of conformity, and the stability testing.
But is there like a difference in the ingredients you use, both here and there? There's no difference.
There's no difference.
Really? Okay.
Export is not easy.
Yes. Yes.
I think I'm busy trying to get the business export ready because as South African brands, in a pan-African context, we tend to just try to get around the many pitholes that governments will throw at you in order to get your product across a border. So you'll find Zimbabwean salon owners will simply come into my store, buy what they need to buy, take it home on a bus, take it home in their cars, take it home via what they call a forwarder. And salons in Botswana and Swaziland will also do that. They'll just personally pick the product up and forward it via one of their contacts over the border, because in South African export terms, we are not an export-friendly country. Let's say the shampoo is 100 Rand. It'll cost me 350 Rand to export it. Now, does that make business sense? So by the time it gets there, it's unaffordable to the Botswana person wanting to use it. So export in Africa, in between African countries, tends to be a very informal segment right now. And then when you start to export overseas, I think we were discussing this earlier and saying how expensive it is, how you would need a hell of a lot of cash to support your logistic, your courier, your export fees. And this is something that if you're into exporting, go to the Chamber of Commerce and do those export ready programs. They are free of charge, and the Chamber of Commerce will show you how to export. But it's definitely not easy, and it's got a lot of logistical pitfalls. A lot of the American brands that came into the market, can you guys name me some American brands that you know that you would have seen at Clicks or Dis-Chem? Carol's daughter, Auntie Jackie's, who's the other daughter? What's her name? God, there's so many of them. There's Mixed Chicks, there's Shea Moisture, there's hundreds of those American brands came flooding into the market. They realized 5 years later after the fact that you were a worthwhile consumer category. And they get here and everything's really expensive. Now nobody's buying it. So they go to the Clicks buyer and they say, but now we've spent a fortune bringing this product from LA or New York. We've spent an absolute fortune, maybe 3 times what the product was worth bringing it into South Africa to come and test this consumer category, and nobody's buying it because it's 350 rand a jar. So then they go on a retail discounting strategy, and then they put the prices right down to come and compete with us as local brands, right? And then they can start to see some sales traction. But the South African consumer is becoming more and more proudly South African around the brands she's using. Prof is wearing Mancho today. You know, I'm wearing Petrolik jewelry because if I've got 1,500 rand for a dress, I'm not going to buy a Chinese dress. I'm going to buy an African girl's dress because that matters to me. It makes me feel good. I have no idea how I got here or what I'm talking about anymore. And then we were talking about export, but it's a proudly African ethos that's driving us now. We must not stop that. We must continue that. We must support African designers and product makers. And we must, you know, there's AGOA and there's a whole lot of other different programs to help us export more efficiently. And you can find that out at the Chamber of Commerce. But export is a logistical challenge.
I think.
But I just want to add that there are tax incentives. So we went to the US, I think in 2016. We are in our final stages of registering with AGOA, and there will be tax incentives for us to export the products to the US.
Thank you so much for that. But before we get into exporting, you need to also build, you need to start somewhere. Like you need to, I mean, you even said that it's very expensive. I'm of the opinion that it's very expensive to start a business. I'm trying to determine if whether starting your businesses was very expensive for you.
I think the starting point is getting the consumer, because without the consumer, you don't have a business. So for us, it was a process of getting as much people to try out our product, because it's difficult to convince, you know, somebody that's already using Clinique to say, you know, try this. So we had to go through a process of giveaways, if I may call it, to say sampling, you know, try out our product. And to date, I think our biggest marketing, because we haven't done above the line yet, so it will be you telling your friend, and that's how we have grown as a business.
Taryn? On establishing, bootstrapping your business, like how did you fund your business? I know you had Shark Tank as well. I think we want to determine how that happened as well.
I self-funded my business to date. I still self-fund. I've never received government funding or corporate support. I realized I wanted to do it when I saw the first few months of sales, and I realized there was definitely an entire category missing in what South African women were being offered. So I went and I got myself an overdraft, which is the equivalent of a loan. And I took responsibility for that loan, and that's how I got started. And the loan, exactly what you're saying, went into building consumer trust in who we were, testing lots of products on our consumers, people following us on social media saying, "Hi, Tandi in PE, would you like to test out our new co-wash, and you can give me answer these 10 points and you've got that product for free." So we actually built our consumer base. We built our audience on social media before we actually built the product range. So all the feedback that we got from our consumers in that test phase was what we used to develop the final range. So we always say our shoppers actually made the range for us. So that was kind of how we got started in terms of finance and in terms of marketing and building consumer base, which is, I think, how a lot of us local brands have managed to get to market in what is a very saturated, very mature hair care market. A lot of the girls at L'Oreal will describe hair care as a retail bloodbath, because there's a lot of product moving, there's a lot of discounting strategies. Cosmetics as a whole has hundreds of competitors at any given time. You have to be so clear about what your USP is. Once you decide to bootstrap and once you decide to invest your own money and time and sweat and blood and tears, you have to ask yourself, what is my unique selling point?